A wall of dust slammed into a lonely Arizona diner just as three battered German shepherds began barking, a desperate, coded warning in the desert night. Sam Ramirez should have locked the door and waited out the storm. Instead, he followed the dog's lead, stepping into danger, and found a wounded Marine and a terrified child fighting for their lives inside a locked SUV. What happened next tore open old wounds and forced a fractured town to confront the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and family. This is the night the outcasts became heroes, and the broken found their place to belong. As we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and if you believe second chances can heal even the deepest scars, please like, subscribe, and join our growing family for more stories of hope and resilience. It was the kind of Arizona sundown that set the world on fire, ribbons of red and copper bleeding into the endless sky, the heat lingering in the blacktop, even as shadows stretched long across the outskirts of Tucson. Sam Ramirez, ex-Marine, now widowed and quietly running his modest roadside diner, always felt the dusk pull at old scars. He moved through the diner's closing rituals with practiced hands, the hush of solitude settling in like an old friend. The place still smelled of coffee and bacon grease, the radio playing some faded country ballad that echoed loneliness out across the empty booths. But tonight, something felt different. A flicker of movement in the parking lot, sharp and wrong, made Sam glance out through the streaked window. That's when he saw them. Three German shepherds, coats marked by dust and sunlight, circling a locked silver SUV at the edge of the lot. Their barking wasn't wild or mindless. No, it was sharp, focused, deliberate. Each dog took a place, one by the hood, another at the driver's door, the last by the rear tire, moving as if directed by some silent code. Sam's breath caught. It was the way the shepherds worked, the tension in their bodies, the precision of their movements. It sent a rush of old memories. Military dogs overseas, the urgent language of danger skittering up his spine. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, the screen door slamming behind him. The desert air hit his face like a slap, hot and dry and full of the wild promise of trouble. "Easy, boys," Sam called out, voice low and steady, the way you speak to animals and men on the edge. The lead dog, a big black and tan with a faint white blaze, locked eyes with him. The dog's tail was low, hackles raised, but there was something desperate in those eyes. They barked again in a pattern, 3 barks, then a pause, then 2. Sam recognized the rhythm. Morse code. Panic mixed with purpose. Sam moved closer, hands open, trying to read the dogs. A sudden memory of his wife, Lila, her soft voice teaching him to trust the signals animals give, echoed in his head. These dogs weren't just alerting. They were pleading. The SUV's windows were tinted, the doors locked tight. But as Sam peered inside, he caught a flash of movement. A hand, battered and trembling, pressed up against the glass. In the palm was a set of military dog tags, glinting in the fading sun. They shook with silent urgency. Sam's heart skipped. Someone was trapped. He pressed his own hand to the window and nodded, hoping the gesture would register. The shepherds went silent for a heartbeat, watching him, then resumed their circling, noses pressed to the seams of the SUV. Sam tried the doors, locked. He peered in again. The face behind the glass was gaunt, streaked with sweat and dirt, fear etched deep in every line. The dog tags clinked softly, and Sam saw the name, Troy Baxter. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. Troy Baxter, He remembered that name from a news report. Marine. Reported missing after a brutal stint overseas. What the hell was going on? Sam's mind spun through possibilities. Was this a setup? A trap? But the fear in Troy's eyes and the desperate intelligence in the shepherd's actions felt too real to be a ruse. He pulled out his phone and dialed the sheriff, Matthew Moreno, voice low. "Matt, it's Sam. I got a situation at the diner. Bring help, quietly. Military code, Matt. It's urgent." As Sam hung up, the shepherds clustered closer. One, smaller, scarred across the muzzle, scratched a frantic pattern in the dirt at Sam's feet. Dots and dashes, a child's SOS. Sam crouched, reading the message with disbelief. It was a code for danger inside, hostage. He looked back at the SUV. The reality settled on him with icy weight. Whoever put Troy in there, and these shepherds, was still nearby. The parking lot felt suddenly exposed, every scrap of shadow a threat. A gust of wind tossed grit in his eyes, and the shepherds bristled, turning as one toward the far side of the lot. Sam followed their gaze. Just beyond the reach of the streetlights, a figure moved, a silhouette blurred by heat and dust. The shepherds stiffened, barking in a lower, warning register now. Sam's own instincts screamed at him to go inside, lock the doors, and wait for backup. But the memory of Lila's voice, always the voice of reason, the anchor to his storm, held him steady. He stood his ground, shifting so his body shielded the SUV, never taking his eyes off the distant figure. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the scrape of claws, the shallow gasps from inside the SUV, the desert wind carrying the scent of rain and something darker. Sam realized he was holding his breath. He exhaled slow, drawing courage from the silent alliance between him and the shepherds. The distant figure paused, watching, then faded into the gloom. The shepherds relaxed by a fraction, but the tension in the air crackled, alive with warning. Sam turned to the SUV, voice firm but gentle. "Hang on, Troy. Help's coming." The shepherds flanked him, guardians in the rising night, their code and courage stitching a fragile line of hope through the encroaching dark. And above it all, the last blood-red threads of sunset bled out over the desert, as if the land itself knew that tonight everything would change. The dusk surrendered quickly to darkness, swallowing the edge of Tucson in a hush that buzzed with expectation. Sam stood by the SUV, the shepherds close, their ears swiveling with each distant sound. The stranger Sam had glimpsed was gone, but the feeling of being watched lingered, an itch between his shoulder blades that refused to fade. He glanced up at the bruised sky. Clouds, thick and ragged, scudded in from the west. The air grew heavier, laced with static. Sam knew this kind of weather. Out here, a desert sandstorm could roll in with barely a warning, and when it did, even the locals knew to find shelter and wait it out. He hurried back inside the diner, the shepherds shadowing his every step, their bodies tense but controlled. He locked the doors behind him, checked the windows, and peeked back outside. In the distance, faint headlights flickered, then vanished. The parking lot seemed to warp under the oncoming storm, a shifting, unstable place. The diner was empty except for Sam and the dogs, the humming fridge and radio, the only signs of normalcy left. Sam moved behind the counter, grabbing his old, battered cell phone. He opened a secure messaging app, one he hadn't used since his service days. His fingers trembled, muscle memory kicking in as he tapped out a coded message for Sheriff Moreno. In trouble. Military code, come now. Dogs coded SOS, hostage, suspect nearby. Before Sam could take a breath, The wind howled, a sharp, predatory sound that rattled the windows and set the shepherds barking in unison. Grit pattered the glass like sleet. Sam reached under the counter, pulling out a baseball bat. Not much against a gun, but it would have to do. The world outside disappeared behind a yellow-gray wall. The diner, once so familiar, now felt like a fortress under siege. The shepherds fell silent, turning toward the front entrance, their bodies in a perfect line. The bell above the door jangled, startling Sam. The door opened, and a man stepped inside, his silhouette looming against the swirling dust. He closed the door with a careful, deliberate motion. The man looked to be in his early 40s, tall, lean, dressed in weathered jeans and a faded leather jacket. His skin was sunburned, his hair a dirty blonde, and his eyes, cold, pale blue, with a hunger in them Sam recognized from the worst days overseas. The man wiped grit from his brow, eyes never leaving Sam or the shepherds. "Hell of a storm out there," he said, his voice dry, calm. Too calm. "Hope you don't mind if I waited out here?" Sam nodded stiffly, keeping the counter between them. "You're welcome to stay until it blows over. Coffee's cold, but it's strong." The man didn't answer, just stared at the shepherds with a strange intensity. The lead dog, Alpha, Sam would later call him, held his ground, hackles slightly raised. Sam tried to act casual, but his mind raced. Was this the figure from the parking lot? The timing was too neat. He glanced at the clock, then at the back door. The shepherds seemed to understand his tension. The smallest dog, Bravo, slunk to the corner and began scratching at the dusty linoleum, leaving patterns Sam recognized. 3 short scratches, a pause, then 3 more, a Morse code SOS, hidden in plain sight. The stranger's eyes narrowed, as if catching some silent exchange. He moved closer, his boots loud against the tile. "Those your dogs?" he asked. But the tone made it clear he already knew the answer. Sam shook his head. "They just showed up. Smart, though. Act like they've seen trouble." The stranger smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, trouble has a way of finding folks out here." The wind roared, a freight train of sand battering the walls. Visibility dropped to 0. Sam's phone buzzed. He glanced down. One new message from Moreno. "ETA 10 min. Stay safe." Sam swallowed hard, eyes flicking from the stranger to the shepherds. The dog seemed to sense the storm within the storm. Alpha sidled up beside Sam, pressing his nose to Sam's leg, a grounding, living signal. The stranger finally sat at the counter, hands flat, eyes hooded. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said quietly. Sam forced a shaky laugh. "Storm's just got my nerves up." He poured 2 mugs of coffee, hands steadying. "So what brings you to my place at this hour?" The man shrugged. "Passing through. Truck broke down." Sam watched for any tells. A glance, a nervous tick, a lie. The stranger was ice. Then, with the precision of a trap snapping shut, the shepherds suddenly bristled. Charlie, the largest, lunged at the window, barking, wild, urgent. Sam's eyes darted to the parking lot. Through the swirling grit, red and blue lights flickered. Moreno had arrived. The stranger's jaw clenched. He reached into his jacket. "Don't do anything stupid," Sam warned, raising the bat. But before tension could explode, the shepherds began scratching at the floor and walls in an urgent rhythm, drawing the stranger's attention. Outside, Moreno's car door slammed. Footsteps crunched over gravel. The diner felt ready to erupt. The stranger stared at Sam, at the dogs, his knuckles white. "You called the law?" he growled. Sam steadied himself, looking the man dead in the eye. Maybe you should ask yourself what these dogs are really trying to warn us about." As if on cue, the shepherds barked together, a final, desperate signal as the sandstorm's fury reached its peak and the battle lines were drawn in dust, code, and fear. The sandstorm smothered every sound, turning the world outside the diner to a swirling, impenetrable haze. Streetlights flickered and died under a suffocating blanket of grit. The radio lost its signal, reduced to static, then silence. Inside, the light was dim, the air heavy, dust filtering in through every crack, coating the chrome and tile in a thin, ghostly film. Sam could feel the stranger's eyes on him. They were no longer alone. The man, Elliot Crane, Sam would soon learn, had taken command of the space. The kind of silent authority that screamed danger to anyone who'd seen enough war. He had locked the front door, and with a flick of his wrist, drew a pistol from under his jacket, tucking it close against his thigh as if daring Sam to make a move. "Sit," Elliot ordered. The shepherds froze, hackles up, caught between their instinct to protect and the unspoken terror of guns and men like this. Sam lowered himself onto a booth seat, back straight, hands in clear sight. The bat was useless now, abandoned on the linoleum. Elliot stalked to the window and peered out, the storm reflecting in his cold blue eyes. "Nobody's coming through that," he said, almost admiring the storm's violence. "Might as well get comfortable." The shepherds huddled around Sam, their presence grounding him, a shield of living muscle and nerves, every sense on high alert. Time crawled. The only sounds were the howl of the storm and the thud of Sam's heart, so loud he wondered if the stranger could hear it. Sam tried to focus, scanning for openings, reading the man's every twitch. He replayed Lila's words in his mind. "Pay attention to the animals. They'll always show you what's real." The shepherds, tense but watchful, kept glancing toward the parking lot. Something out there mattered more to them than even Elliot's gun. Sam's thoughts drifted, unbidden, to his late wife, the woman who could gentle any wild thing, who'd loved him through the darkness of war and loss, whose memory haunted these quiet nights more than any ghost. He wondered what she'd say to him now, stranded and powerless, with innocent lives on the line. The stranger's gaze landed on Sam, sharp as a knife. "You military?" he asked, voice casual but probing. "Was," Sam replied, his own voice a low rumble. "A long time ago." Elliot studied him, then smirked. "Figures. Only a Marine would be dumb enough to stick around for this mess." Sam said nothing. The shepherds shifted, noses pressed to the dusty glass, ears cocked as if listening for a sound only they could hear. Suddenly, Alpha, whose focus had never wavered, began pawing at the window, whining softly, then looking back at Sam with eyes wide and urgent. Sam leaned forward, whispering, "What is it, boy?" Elliot's attention flicked between Sam and the dog, suspicion deepening. Bravo, the smallest, pressed himself low, crawling beneath the table, his body angled toward the SUV outside. Charlie followed, nosing Sam's knee. Sam glanced out. In the back seat of the locked vehicle, he noticed a shape he'd missed before, a faint outline, small and unmoving. He squinted, the stormlight catching a pale flash behind the glass. His stomach dropped. There was someone else out there. Not just Troy Baxter, but a child. No, a young girl, crumpled in the back seat, her face hidden by a tangle of hair and the darkness within the car. The shepherd's agitation suddenly made sense. Their SOS wasn't just for the battered Marine. It was for her, too. Elliot caught the look and raised his gun. "Don't get any ideas. That car stays locked. You so much as blink wrong, I shoot the dogs first." Sam's jaw clenched, fury and fear mixing inside him. He forced himself to stay calm. "Who is she?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elliot didn't answer. He paced, agitated now, every muscle taut. Sam watched, trying to read him, searching for a weakness. As minutes stretched into hours, the storm's violence never relented. Elliot began to sweat, his veneer of control slipping in the oppressive silence. He railed at Sam, at the world, at the howling wind. But the shepherds never moved from their posts, always between him and Sam, always watching the window. Sam's mind raced with plans, but all routes led to danger. His only hope was to communicate with the outside. If Sheriff Moreno had made it through the storm, maybe he was planning something. Maybe the shepherds' frantic signals would be enough. Outside, lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the SUV. Sam saw the girl's face for an instant. Young, maybe 8 or 9, eyes shut tight, lips moving in prayer or panic. The sight shattered something in Sam. The need to act burned through his helplessness. Elliot started, gun swinging toward the window as thunder cracked overhead. "Shut those dogs up!" he snarled, waving the pistol. The shepherds didn't flinch. Alpha planted himself in front of Sam, teeth bared, tail stiff, a silent refusal. A pounding at the back door made everyone jump. Elliot spun, gun raised, heart hammering so loudly Sam could see the pulse in his neck. "Don't move," he hissed. Sam stayed frozen, but his mind was racing. The shepherds, sensing the moment, began a new code. 3 sharp barks, a pause, a long whine. Morse for help now. Sam forced himself to breathe. The pounding stopped. Through the dust-caked glass, Sam glimpsed a silhouette. Broad shoulders, cowboy hat. Moreno. Relief surged, but he knew this was just the beginning. They were trapped in a pressure cooker, one wrong move away from tragedy. Elliot kept his gun trained on Sam, panic brewing in his eyes. "Nobody's getting out until I get what I came for," he spat. The shepherds never blinked, never wavered, silent sentinels in the storm-lit dark, trusting Sam, guiding him with every signal. As the minutes ticked toward a showdown, none of them could escape. Time inside the diner had taken on a strange, suspended quality. The world outside was still a swirling maelstrom of sand and lightning, but within the narrow walls, the air had grown thick with a different kind of tension, a quiet, breathless waiting. The shepherds clustered around Sam, their bodies drawing a circle of trust that made Elliot's presence feel like an intrusion. Every so often, the storm outside would surge, rattling the windows and making the neon sign flicker, casting everyone in a nervous red light. Elliot's nerves were fraying. He paced in jagged lines, gun always in hand, sweat darkening the collar of his jacket. His eyes darted between Sam, the shepherds, and the murky shapes shifting beyond the windows. The longer the storm raged, the more his bravado seemed to slip away, revealing the brittle panic beneath. Sam sat in the farthest booth, the shepherds pressed against him. He could feel their trembling, muscles tensed, hearts hammering in their chests. Every so often, Alpha would look up at him, searching his face for some unspoken signal. It struck Sam how much trust the dogs were placing in him. It was a raw, instinctive faith, the kind he remembered feeling with his fellow Marines under fire, the kind that turned survival from a selfish act into something shared. He reached out, letting his hand hover near Alpha's neck. The shepherd didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed into Sam's palm just for a second, and it was like a silent promise passing between them. Sam remembered what Lila used to say. Animals don't waste their trust. If they choose you, it means something. He stroked Alpha's head, feeling the coarse fur beneath his fingers, grounding himself in the simple, honest warmth. Outside, the storm was starting to lose its fury, but the tension in the diner only grew. Elliot stared at Sam, suspicion and desperation warring in his eyes. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat, voice cracking. Sam shook his head slowly. "I think we all end up on the wrong side of something, sooner or later." Elliot scoffed, but he looked away, as if the words had touched some old wound. The shepherds watched him, unblinking. Sam realized that their trauma wasn't just tonight's. It was written in old scars, wary glances, and the way they flinched at sudden movements. These dogs had seen abandonment and pain, maybe more than he ever would. Sam's gaze drifted to Bravo, the smallest shepherd who was curled tight against his leg. Bravo's ribs showed beneath his matted fur, a road map of hunger and survival. Sam remembered the stories Lila used to tell about rescue dogs, how they never forgot, but sometimes, with patience, they could learn to trust again. A sudden movement from the window drew everyone's attention. Charlie, the largest shepherd, stood and pressed his nose to the glass, whining softly. Sam followed his gaze and spotted a flicker of light, the sheriff's flashlight, moving carefully around the building. Sheriff Moreno was close, planning something. Sam's heart pounded, a mix of hope and dread. Inside, Elliot's nerves unraveled further. He kicked a chair, sending it crashing against the counter. "Why are they staring at me like that?" he barked, gun hand shaking. Sam met his gaze, steady and calm. "They're waiting for a reason to act. Don't give them one." Elliot glared, but the shepherds didn't flinch. Instead, Alpha began a slow, deliberate motion, pacing from the window to the door, then back to Sam, then the door again. It was as if he was trying to communicate something, using body language that transcended words. Sam's mind worked furiously, trying to decode the message. Alpha paused by the diner's entrance, placing a single paw on the door. His eyes locked on Sam, intense and pleading. "Now," Sam thought. "He wants me ready for something." He slid his hand into his jacket pocket, feeling for the slim flashlight he always carried. He flicked it on, letting the beam dart quickly across the floor, a signal for Moreno, just in case he was watching from outside. The shepherds seemed to understand, their bodies tensing in anticipation. Elliot didn't notice the exchange. He was pacing again, muttering to himself about bad luck and broken promises. Should have left town days ago. Always something gets in the way. Sam took a breath and let his focus settle on the shepherds. They were more than just survivors. They were partners now, drawn together by shared danger. He whispered, "You with me, boys?" Alpha's ears perked. Bravo nuzzled his hand. Charlie stood at the door, muscles bunching. Through the glass, Sam caught another flicker of movement. Moreno was close, maybe seconds away from a breach. Sam braced himself. Every muscle in his body screamed with adrenaline, but he kept his voice steady, eyes on the shepherds. Elliot paused in his pacing, suddenly alert. "What are you up to?" he demanded, stepping toward Sam. Sam looked him in the eye, calm as a stone. "Just waiting. Same as you." The shepherds, as if on cue, lined up at the door. Alpha pressed his paw down, a silent order. Outside, the wind died abruptly, and the world held its breath. Inside the diner, Sam understood at last. The bond between man and dog was more than fear. It was faith, built in the darkest moments. And as the first quiet footsteps sounded at the back, Sam realized he wasn't alone anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. Outside, the desert storm sputtered and faded, leaving behind a charged silence. Inside the diner, every heartbeat felt amplified, every breath edged with anticipation. Sam could feel the shepherds vibrate with tension, muscles bunching, nostrils flaring, tails stiff and straight as arrows. He glanced once at the door, once at Alpha's paw pressed firmly against the frame, and knew the time had come. Elliot's eyes darted back and forth. The gun in his hand quivered, fingers whitening as he pressed the barrel against his thigh. "Something's happening," he muttered, sweat shining on his brow. The shepherds responded with a single unified growl, low, primal, a warning and a promise. Suddenly, a burst of movement outside shattered the moment's stillness. Shadows streaked past the windows, Sheriff Moreno and his deputies, moving in formation, faces hidden behind bandanas and goggles. The back door creaked, hinges squealing. Elliot spun, gun raised. "Stay back!" he yelled, panic bursting through his brittle calm. Sam didn't move. He watched as the shepherds tensed. Charlie at the front, Bravo and Alpha flanking. The dogs' bodies formed a living barricade, their gaze never wavering from Elliot. In a single heartbeat, everything erupted. The back door crashed open, desert wind and gunmetal filling the air. Sheriff Moreno dove in first, weapon drawn, voice booming. "Drop it, Elliot! Hands where I can see 'em!" Elliot didn't hesitate. He lunged for Sam, grabbing him by the collar and shoving him toward the window. "You think I'm letting you take me? Not tonight!" He spun, eyes wild, gun swinging toward the shepherds. Charlie sprang. He hit Elliot's arm like a freight train, jaws clamping around the man's wrist. The gun fired. A deafening roar, bullets slamming harmlessly into the ceiling tiles. Elliot howled in pain, slamming his free fist into Charlie's side. But the shepherd didn't let go. Teeth sunk deep, a wall of fury and loyalty. Moreno's deputies rushed forward, tackling Elliot from behind. Bravo and Alpha joined Charlie, barking and snapping, herding the gunman away from Sam. The room was chaos. Shouts, gunshots, the metallic clatter of chairs and plates as men and dogs collided in a frenzy of movement. Sam rolled to his feet, scanning for the keys to the SUV. Through the shattered front window, he saw the girl, still huddled in the back seat, her eyes wide and shining with fear. Sam's heart hammered. He dove for the counter, hands searching for the spare keys he kept for emergencies. His fingers closed around cool metal. He bolted for the door. Outside, sand stung his face, wind still tugging at his clothes. Sam sprinted to the SUV, the shepherds right behind him, Bravo limping but determined. He jammed the key into the lock, twisting hard. The door popped open. "Hey!" Elliot's voice, raw with rage, rang out behind him. Sam ignored it, yanking open the back door. The girl stared up at him, frozen. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here to help. Can you move?" Sam's voice was gentle, but the urgency was unmistakable. The girl nodded, crawling toward him. He scooped her into his arms, the shepherds circling protectively. Back inside the diner, chaos reigned. Elliot broke free from the deputies for a split second, his eyes wild and desperate. He charged for the door, only to be cut off by Charlie, who leaped, teeth bared, forcing Elliot to stumble and fall. Moreno pinned him, wrestling the gun away as the other deputies finally secured the cuffs. Sam carried the girl across the lot, sheltering her from the grit and broken glass. Alpha and Bravo ran beside him, never taking their eyes off the now captive Elliot. Sirens wailed in the distance. Backup was coming. Sam set the girl gently in the back of a patrol car, wrapping her in his jacket. "You're safe now, I promise." The girl clung to Bravo, burying her face in the shepherd's fur, sobs shaking her tiny shoulders. The deputies stood watch, guns out, scanning the horizon for any sign of further danger. Sam rushed back to the SUV, popping the trunk. There, amid spilled groceries and a tangle of blankets, he found a battered military duffel. Inside, Troy Baxter's service records, dog tags, and a blood-stained field journal. He grabbed everything, his mind racing. As he turned, a shout drew his attention. Elliot, now handcuffed and furious, spat at Moreno's feet. "You don't know what you're dealing with! This isn't over!" Moreno's expression was stone. "It is for you." Sam brought the duffel to the sheriff, passing over the evidence. Moreno nodded, gratitude and respect in his tired eyes. The shepherds gathered around, tails wagging in a tentative, exhausted celebration. The adrenaline finally crashed. Sam leaned against the patrol car, feeling every ache and bruise, the girl still clutching Bravo, Charlie licking Sam's hand as if to say, "We made it." Lights flickered on in the diner again, the chaos slowly giving way to the first breaths of relief. The wind had died. The nightmare was over, for now. But Sam knew, as he watched the shepherds settle around the rescued girl and Troy's battered belongings, that this night's courage and chaos were only the beginning of something bigger, something still lurking in the desert shadows. The air outside the diner was thick with the residue of the storm, dust swirling in lazy eddies, broken glass crunching under the boots of lawmen and rescuers. Flashlights cut through the haze, blue and red emergency lights pulsing against the deepening night. For a moment, everything felt still, as if the violence inside had sucked all sound and movement from the world. Then a deputy's voice cracked the silence. "He's running toward the wash." Elliot, hands still bloodied from the fight, had broken free in the chaos. He bolted across the lot, ducking behind a battered pickup, and sprinted toward the wide-open darkness of the desert. The shepherds, without hesitation, leaped after him, Alpha at the lead, with Bravo and Charlie following close, paws flying over the churned sand. Moreno and two deputies gave chase, flashlights bobbing, guns drawn. Sam stood frozen for half a second, watching the scene unfold. The girl was safe, still curled up with Bravo in the back of the patrol car, her breathing ragged but steady. Sam caught Moreno's eye, an unspoken trust passing between them, then turned and followed, his old Marine instincts snapping into focus. His legs ached, his lungs burned, but the desert was in his blood. He ran, heart hammering toward the shouts and the echo of barking shepherds. The landscape opened up. No lights, no shelter, only sagebrush and the ghostly outline of the arroyo where flash floods carved deep scars into the land. Elliot's silhouette flickered between the shadows. He clutched something close to his chest, a glint of metal. Sam guessed it was a knife, maybe the backup gun. This wasn't just escape. Elliot was making a stand. Moreno shouted, "Stop, Elliot, it's over!" The only answer was the howl of the wind and the shepherd's relentless barking. Alpha led the charge, his big frame weaving through the brush. Suddenly a sharp cry, Bravo, limping but determined, had taken a hit. Elliot had swung out with the knife, slashing the shepherd's side, leaving a streak of red in the dust. But the dogs didn't back down. Charlie darted forward, nipping at Elliot's heels, keeping him moving, herding him away from the patrol cars, the diner, and, most importantly, the girl. Sam kept pace, sweat stinging his eyes, boots thudding against the hard earth. He shouted, "Alpha, with me!" The shepherd, recognizing his partner's voice, changed direction, cutting Elliot off from the deepest part of the wash. Moreno and the deputies flanked Elliot, boxing him in. Elliot spun around, wild-eyed, back pressed to a spindly mesquite. The moon caught the blade in his hand, silver and slick. "Nobody comes any closer!" he roared. "You think I care about any of you? I'll gut these mutts before you get me!" Alpha didn't flinch. He planted himself in front of the wounded Bravo, hackles raised, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. The deputies hesitated, guns trained on Elliot, but unwilling to risk a shot with the dogs so close. It was a standoff, the kind Sam knew too well. One heartbeat away from bloodshed. Sam raised his hands, stepping into the shifting beam of Moreno's flashlight. "Elliot, you're done. Let it go. No one else needs to get hurt." His voice was calm, steady, a leader's voice, the kind you used when panic threatened to tear men apart. Elliot laughed, sharp and ugly. "You don't know anything about hurt. You think these dogs care about you? They're just tools, like I was, like Baxter out there." He spat in the dirt, eyes flicking toward the shepherds. "You all think loyalty matters, but it's just a leash waiting to snap." Sam didn't move, his focus locked on Elliot's face. "That's where you're wrong. These dogs aren't here because anyone forced them. They stayed because they chose to. Same as us." For a second, Elliot wavered. His grip on the knife loosened. But then the adrenaline surged, and he lunged, straight at Alpha, blade flashing. It happened fast. Alpha met him head-on, body braced, teeth bared. The knife glanced off Alpha's shoulder, drawing blood, but the shepherd never let up. He barked, loud and defiant, distracting Elliot just long enough for Sam to close the distance. Sam tackled Elliot from behind, the two of them crashing to the ground, sand and blood mingling in the dirt. Moreno and the deputies pounced, wresting the knife from Elliot's hand, pinning him down. Elliot thrashed, but the fight was gone. Moreno cuffed him, reading him his rights as the adrenaline finally bled out of the night. Alpha staggered, sides heaving, fur sticky with blood. The girl, watching from the patrol car, burst into tears, banging on the window until a deputy rushed over to let her out. She ran straight to Alpha, hugging the dog with all the strength her small arms could muster. Sam knelt beside them, scratching Bravo behind the ears and pressing his hand gently to Alpha's wounded shoulder. "You did good, buddy. You did real good." The other shepherds pressed in, tails wagging, bodies trembling with exhaustion and pride. Police lights lit up the desert, painting the sand in red and blue. Deputies led Elliot away, and for the first time all night, the air felt lighter, charged not with danger, but with relief and hard-won hope. As Sam held Alpha close, he realized that in the heart of the desert, on a night carved out of fear and violence, a new kind of family had been forged, one built on loyalty, courage, and the silent bond between wounded souls who refused to quit. When the dust of the standoff finally settled, a heavy, uncertain quiet blanketed the desert. Moreno's deputies guided Elliot, now shackled and defeated, toward the flashing blue and red patrol cars. The shepherds lingered by Sam and the girl, exhausted but unbowed. Alpha, wounded but still on his feet, pressed his head against Sam's leg as if asking for assurance that it was really over. But Sam knew the desert didn't give up its secrets easily, and tonight's chaos was only the surface. He watched the deputies search the battered SUV, flashlights playing over every inch. When Moreno emerged from the vehicle, he wasn't holding just Troy Baxter's records and dog tags. He also clutched a handful of crumpled papers and a map, thick with unfamiliar symbols and red-inked circles. The sheriff's face was grim. Sam walked over, Bravo and Charlie limping at his side. The girl, at last comforted by a deputy's gentle arm and a warm blanket, looked on in wide-eyed silence. "What did you find?" Sam asked. Moreno unfolded one of the papers. "Looks like a list. Names, dates, locations. Not just Baxter. There are 5 other names here. 4 missing persons reported from the region in the last year. One of them is a kid." His voice wavered. "And this map. Looks like drop sites. I'll need to get this to the feds." Sam's stomach clenched. He looked down at the shepherds, suddenly understanding the haunted look in their eyes. They weren't just survivors. They were witnesses to something much bigger. While medics tended to Alpha's wound, the deputies pressed Elliot for answers. He gave nothing but silence and a cold, defiant glare. But the evidence spoke for itself. The town's emergency radios buzzed with chatter. The rumor mill spinning up before the sun even had a chance to rise. In the thin, uncertain light of dawn, the truth began to spread through Red Mesa like wildfire. At the diner, Sam and Moreno laid out the documents, piecing together the threads of the case. A handful of locals trickled in, faces Sam knew well, their curiosity mixing with fear. Word spread about the shepherds, the stray dogs who'd risked everything to protect a Marine and a little girl, who had run into gunfire and refused to abandon the innocent. The mood in the room shifted from anxiety to awe as deputies told what they'd seen. Charlie's leap to disarm Elliot, Alpha standing guard, Bravo's desperate efforts to signal for help. But not everyone in town was comfortable. As the hours wore on, some muttered about strays bringing trouble and outsiders stirring up old ghosts. One old rancher in a sweat-stained hat shook his head, grumbling, "We don't need hero dogs around here. We need peace." But others pushed back, arguing fiercely in favor of honoring the shepherds. Sheriff Moreno made his decision public just after sunrise. Standing on the diner's porch, he addressed the crowd, the shepherds arrayed at his feet. "These dogs saved lives tonight. They acted with more courage and loyalty than many folks I've known. I'm submitting a petition to have them recognized as official part-time K-9 units for Red Mesa. They deserve a place here as much as any of us." A ripple of applause followed, awkward at first, but growing. Sam, standing with Bravo, felt a strange swell of pride, a feeling he hadn't known since his days in uniform. The girl's family arrived as the sun crested the horizon, her mother collapsing in grateful sobs, her father kneeling to hug the shepherds, tears streaking his dust-stained face. The whole diner seemed to breathe easier, the nightmare replaced with relief. The town's gratitude was fierce, if sometimes awkward. A local journalist snapped photos for the paper, catching the moment the girl, finally safe, placed her tiny hand on Alpha's battered head. Sam found himself fielding questions from everyone. "How did you know to trust the dogs? What made you stay and fight?" He answered as best he could, always sharing credit with his 4-legged partners. Later, as the morning wore on, the investigation grew deeper. The map from Elliot's belongings matched with several recent disappearances: old mining shafts, remote canyons, lonely rest stops marked in angry red ink. State police and federal agents arrived, swarming over the evidence, combing the desert for any sign of more victims. Sam gave them everything he'd found: Troy Baxter's battered duffel, the blood-stained journal, the coded notes. A deputy brought word that Baxter, still weak but alive, had been airlifted to a hospital in Tucson. Before he left, he insisted on seeing Alpha and Charlie, kneeling with tears in his eyes as he whispered thanks into their fur. "You saved me. All of you." His voice cracked. "I'll never forget it." The shepherds, once unwanted strays, suddenly found themselves at the center of a town's reckoning. Some wanted them gone, afraid of what their presence meant, but more saw them for what they were: guardians, survivors, and heroes. The tension in the diner turned slowly into something new, a quiet hope that maybe with enough courage, even old wounds could heal. As the sun climbed, Sam realized he felt something else: belonging. Not just in the diner or the town, but in this fragile new community that spanned battered Marines, rescued children, and dogs who had learned to trust again. For the first time in a long while, he let himself believe that second chances weren't just for the innocent. They were for everyone brave enough to fight for them. By noon the next day, Red Mesa was a different town. Sunlight bleached the desert clean, and for once, the air felt light, carrying laughter and relief instead of secrets and fear. At the diner, the parking lot filled with trucks and battered sedans, neighbors crowding in with coffee and casseroles, eager to see the heroes up close. News had traveled fast. Everyone from the mayor to the local news channel wanted a glimpse of the German shepherds that had, in one violent night, changed the fate of their community. Sheriff Moreno, never a man for speeches, found himself in the awkward role of master of ceremonies. He stood on a makeshift stage, a couple of sawhorses and plywood, flanked by deputies and the three shepherds, their fur brushed clean, wounds dressed with fresh bandages. Moreno cleared his throat, squinting into the sun. "We don't get many chances to say thank you in this life," he began, voice rough but steady. "Last night these dogs and the people who trusted them showed us what courage looks like. They put themselves between us and real danger again and again. And they did it not for reward, but because it was right." A ripple of applause passed through the crowd, scattered at first, but growing louder. Moreno nodded at Sam, who stood just behind Bravo, one hand resting on the shepherd's neck. Charlie sat beside Troy Baxter, finally out of the hospital, his face pale but smiling, hand still shaking as he clung to the dog's collar. The little girl, now dressed in clean clothes and a new pair of pink sneakers, clung to her mother's hand, her gaze never straying far from Alpha. The mayor stepped forward with a velvet box, opening it to reveal 3 shiny medals, small, circular tokens engraved with Guardian of Red Mesa. With solemn care, he fastened them around the dogs' necks, one by one. Cameras flashed. Tears pricked the eyes of more than a few in the crowd. Sam felt Bravo tremble under his hand, and for a second, he realized the shepherd was just as overwhelmed as any of the people around him. After the ceremony, townsfolk lined up to shake hands and offer thanks. A group of veterans, their service caps faded and frayed, approached Sam, clapping him on the back and exchanging stories of old battles and loyal dogs. "Never thought I'd see the day," one grizzled vet said, "when a couple of strays would teach us all what bravery really looks like." Sam smiled, feeling the weight of his own scars lighten just a bit. Across the lot, Troy Baxter hugged Alpha and Charlie, his gratitude spilling out in a jumble of words. "I owe you my life," he whispered, pressing his forehead to Alpha's. "You never gave up on me. I promise. I won't give up on you either." Troy turned to the crowd, announcing his decision. He would adopt Alpha and Charlie, giving them a home and a mission, helping other veterans who struggled to find their place back in the world. Sam watched the little girl's reunion with her family, her mother sobbing, her father kneeling in the dust to thank each of the shepherds, eyes red with relief. The girl, her trauma still raw but softened by safety, wrapped her arms around Bravo's neck and refused to let go. It was then Sam realized how deeply he'd come to care for these dogs. When the mayor approached him about adopting Bravo, Sam accepted without hesitation. "He's family now," he said quietly, and Bravo wagged his tail as if understanding every word. As the sun dipped lower, Moreno and Sam found a quiet spot on the diner's porch, the shepherds at their feet. The sheriff sipped his coffee, voice thoughtful. "You ever think about doing more with this?" he asked. "You and Baxter. Maybe there's something here, a way to help dogs like these and people like us." Sam nodded. "I've been thinking the same. We could start a program, call it Guardian Paws. Rescue strays, train them to work with veterans, give everybody a second chance." Moreno grinned. "You make it happen, Sam. The department'll back you all the way." Later that evening, the town threw a barbecue, grills smoking, music drifting across the lot, children chasing each other between the tables while the shepherds loped along at their sides, tails high. For the first time, Sam didn't feel like an outsider. He belonged here, not just because of what he'd done, but because he'd let others in. The little girl found him in the crowd, her small hand reaching for Bravo's fur. "Can I visit him?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "Anytime you want," Sam promised, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Bravo's got a lot of friends now. So do you." As dusk settled, Sam looked around at the faces lit by firelight. Baxter, Moreno, the girl's family, the townsfolk who'd once been strangers, and felt something deeper than pride. It was hope, born not of miracles, but of hard choices and silent courage. Before midnight, Troy and Sam met behind the diner, sketching out plans for Guardian Paws, finding land, building kennels, training the first teams of veterans and shepherds. They worked by lantern light, their laughter and quiet talk drifting into the warm desert night. The shepherds curled at their feet, safe and content at last. By the time the stars wheeled overhead, Red Mesa was changed for good. In the place where pain and fear had lived, a new community had taken root. One built on loyalty, redemption, and the promise that no one, man or dog, would ever have to face the darkness alone. The desert seemed softer now, as if some of its old wounds had begun to heal. The days passed, slow and golden, the nights alive with crickets and distant coyote song. On the edge of Red Mesa, where tumbleweeds once piled against an abandoned fence, stood a new building, modest, low-slung, painted white against the endless sky. The hand-painted sign read, "Guardian Paws." Underneath, someone had added, in careful script, "Where second chances are for everyone." Inside, the shelter was always in motion. Veterans in jeans and old service jackets moved through the halls, laughter and gentle curses mixing with the happy yips of dogs. Sam found himself waking each morning to a chorus of barks and thumping tails, a reminder that he was needed, that he was home, in a way he hadn't felt since before Lila's passing. Bravo became his shadow, never far from his side, helping with training, greeting new arrivals, and offering a kind of comfort that words never could. Sam spent hours in the dusty yard, teaching both men and dogs the slow art of trust. How to read fear in a stance. How to offer patience when anger threatened to take over. How to recognize the quiet signs that someone, canine or human, was having a hard day. Alpha and Charlie, now Troy's loyal companions, thrived as therapy dogs. They seemed to sense when a vet was struggling. Alpha would rest his big head on a trembling knee, Charlie would nudge a hand until it opened, demanding to be petted. Their calm presence worked wonders. Troy, still healing from his own nightmares, found a new mission. Working with veterans haunted by old battles, teaching them that courage didn't always mean facing gunfire. Sometimes it meant showing up, day after day, and asking for help. Sam often found himself on the porch at dusk, looking out over the desert as the sky burned orange and violet. He'd sip his coffee, Bravo at his feet, and think about loyalty, not as something demanded, but as a gift that had to be earned, over time, with patience and understanding. He remembered the first night he met the shepherds, the way their eyes had searched his face, measuring whether he could be trusted. That trust, hard won, had changed everything. The shelter drew people from all over, some locals curious about the dogs, some veterans looking for purpose, a few families who'd been touched by the shepherd's courage. The little girl who had been rescued that night came by often, her laugh ringing out as she played fetch with Bravo and Charlie. Her family, once haunted by fear, now volunteered at Guardian Paws, serving meals and cleaning kennels. Her father started a garden out back, coaxing tomatoes and peppers from the desert soil, a living symbol that even the hardest places could bloom. There were days when the old pain crept back, for all of them. Some mornings, Sam woke from dreams of battlefields and loss, his heart pounding. Some days Bravo would flinch at a sudden noise, or Alpha would limp a little more on his wounded leg. But here, in this new community, no one had to pretend. They shared their stories, their struggles, and, slowly, their hopes for the future. One afternoon, a visitor from the state came by, a dour bureaucrat in a suit too hot for the desert, clipboard in hand. He asked questions, toured the kennels, and watched a training session in silence. At the end, he nodded. "You're doing good work here. There's talk of funding to expand. People notice when things change for the better, even out in places like this." Sam thanked him, but as the man drove away in a cloud of dust, he realized that the real success wasn't in money or recognition. It was in the small, everyday moments. The way a dog who once cowered at the back of a cage now bounded across the yard. The way a veteran who'd lost all faith in himself could laugh again, share a joke, or help someone else. The rescue was still work. Messy, hard, sometimes heartbreaking, but it was honest, and it was enough. At sunset, the girl visited again, this time with a bouquet of wildflowers. She knelt in the grass, laying the flowers before the shepherds as they watched her with wise, patient eyes. Her laughter floated across the yard, mixing with the wind. Sam stood in the doorway, smiling, tears pricking his eyes. He felt Lila's memory, not as a wound, but as a warm presence, her voice urging him to keep going, to keep opening doors for hope. That night, Sam gathered everyone, staff, volunteers, families, and the shepherds, for a simple meal under the stars. Plates of barbecue, bowls of potato salad, the smell of cornbread mingled with the sharp tang of sage. Troy stood and said a few words about what it meant to be given a second chance, about how courage came in many shapes. Sheriff Moreno added that true heroism wasn't always loud or easy to see. Sometimes it was quiet, stubborn, and persistent as desert rain. As the sun set, a feeling of peace settled over Guardian Paws. In the laughter, the stories, and the easy silence, Sam saw what they'd built. Not just a shelter, but a true community. One bound by shared wounds and shared healing, where even the most broken souls could find a way forward. He looked down at Bravo, who gazed back with trusting eyes. "We're home now, aren't we, boy?" Sam whispered. Bravo licked his hand, as if in answer. And in that simple, wordless moment, Sam understood. This was what it meant to be a hero. To stay, to try again, to refuse to give up on hope. A year passed, and with each turning season, the story of that night at Red Mesa wove itself deeper into the fabric of the town. People still talked about it, the storm, the gunmen, the battered shepherds who changed everything. But by now, the tale had become something richer. It was a story about what happened after, about healing, belonging, and the quiet legacy of ordinary courage. Every summer, on the night the storm had struck, the town gathered for a candlelit walk through the desert. It started at the diner, the place where chaos and hope first collided. Sam would unlock the doors, prop them wide, and greet each neighbor with a hug or a handshake. The memory of Lila in every gesture. Sheriff Moreno, his badge polished for the occasion, would organize the children, giving them each a glow stick and a word of encouragement. Troy Baxter, face sun-browned and steady, brought Alpha and Charlie, who now wore their medals with an easy pride. Bravo, graying at the muzzle but spry as ever, trotted at Sam's side. The little girl, grown taller and more confident, carried the first lantern. Her family, once fractured by fear, now led the way, their laughter echoing under the open sky. Behind them, veterans in well-worn jackets and young families with strollers and dogs all walked together, forming a living thread of community that wound across the moonlit sand. The path wound out past Guardian Paws, now twice the size it had been. A cluster of bright buildings surrounded by new trees, the walls alive with murals painted by local kids. On one, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie leapt through a field of desert wildflowers. On another, Sam, Lila, and the shepherds stood side by side, a message painted overhead. Loyalty is a choice, not a chain. At the edge of the desert, the crowd stopped. Sam stood in the front, the lanterns casting a gentle glow on his face. He looked out at the faces around him, Sheriff Moreno, the mayor, Troy, the girl's family, the volunteers and strangers who had become kin. He cleared his throat, feeling the weight of the moment. We're here tonight to remember what was lost and what was saved. Some of us have scars that can't be seen. Some have wounds that took a long time to heal. But tonight, we're not just remembering pain. We're celebrating what we built together. A home, a community, and a promise that none of us will ever be alone again. Alpha sat at Sam's feet, gaze fixed on the horizon. Charlie and Bravo flanked him, tails thumping quietly. Sam reached down and stroked each dog in turn, his heart full. The sheriff spoke next, voice carrying in the stillness. Sometimes the world wants you to believe that heroes are the ones who shout the loudest or fight the hardest. But what I learned that night, and in all the days since, is that true heroes are the ones who keep showing up. The ones who refuse to walk away, no matter how tough it gets. That's what these dogs did. That's what all of you have done. As the candles flickered, Troy added, "We didn't just rescue each other that night. We made a promise. To the lost, to the wounded, to every soul who's ever wondered if there's a place for them. Guardian Paws isn't just a shelter for dogs or a support group for veterans. It's a family. And families take care of their own." The little girl stepped forward, her eyes bright in the lantern light. She held out a bouquet of desert lilies and laid them at the base of a newly planted tree, a memorial to those who didn't make it home, but whose memory shaped the ones who did. She whispered, "Thank you for saving me." And everyone understood she wasn't just talking to the dogs or Sam or Troy. She was speaking to the spirit of the place, the chain of kindness that had pulled her back from the darkness. The crowd observed a moment of silence, lanterns held high, the only sound the whisper of the wind through mesquite and the distant call of a nightbird. Then, as if in answer, the shepherds barked once, sharp, proud, alive. Back at the diner, coffee and pie waited. Kids played games in the parking lot, while adults shared old stories and new dreams. Sam sat on the steps with Bravo, watching as the girl and her family joined the celebration, laughter ringing out in the starlit air. He felt Lila's presence, quiet and steady, in the joy and gratitude that overflowed all around him. The years would roll on, and each summer, the night of remembrance became a tradition, a time to honor the guardians of Red Mesa, to remember the lost, and to renew the promise of community. Tourists sometimes stopped by, drawn by the story, but it belonged to the town now. Guardian Paws continued to grow, offering new hope to strays and soldiers alike. Other towns sent their own wounded, human and canine, and Red Mesa welcomed them all. The legacy of that desert night wasn't just the medals or the newspaper articles or the murals on the wall. It lived in small, everyday choices. The way people looked out for each other. The way nobody was left behind. The way a wounded dog or a lonely vet could find a place to start again. Sam understood, more deeply than ever, that loyalty wasn't about obedience or duty. It was about choosing to stand together, to risk love and disappointment, to make a family out of broken parts. One morning, as the sun rose over the sand and the shepherds bounded ahead, Sam stood at the edge of the property, coffee in hand. The little girl, now nearly a teenager, came to stand beside him. "Do you think we'll always have heroes here?" she asked. Sam smiled, his eyes crinkling in the golden light. "As long as we keep believing in each other, we will. Heroes aren't born, kid, they're made. By the choices we make. By how we treat each other. By how we never give up, even when the world tells us to." The desert wind rose, carrying laughter and the promise of another day. Sam looked out across the land, surrounded by friends, dogs, and the family he'd chosen. For the first time in years, he felt whole. And as the sun climbed higher, the guardians of Red Mesa, Sam, Bravo, Alpha, Charlie, and all those who had found a home, walked forward together into a future built on hope, courage, and the quiet, unbreakable code that bound them all.